obviously one of the things I tell creators is you need to be authentic. But the problem with that is that now people are creating content to make themselves look more authentic by, so being more authentic is actually them faking being more authentic, which defeats the purpose, right?
13 years inside Google and YouTube, time with TikTok, and now you're a mom, starting your own or running your own business. Now you've officially started it. Hala, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Brandon. And that was actually the nicest and shortest and most to the point introduction I've had. So thanks for that.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm anxious to hear your thoughts since you spent so much time inside, so to speak, you have all the insider trading, and specifically in the age of AI, of how has AI affected the industry when it comes to content creation?
Right. I mean, so where do I start with that one? So with AI, look, AI has shifted the landscape of most things, not just content creation. It's made life easier for a lot of people. It's enhanced processes, especially if you set up systems where people can kind of, maximize efficiency. It's amazing. When it comes to content creation, it's kind of the same thing, right? So the audience doesn't want you to create an AI version of yourself. It wants that authentic version of who you are because that's who they came to see and that's who they fell in love with. So that's not really where AI is thriving in the content creation space. AI thrives in all the difficult, admin bits. So like editing, choosing custom thumbnails, writing good descriptions, all that stuff, all that heavy manual work, or it used to be manual, even data analysis, so you can use AI tools to help you analyze your performance and then work on improving that using, AI as kind of like your second brain. So there's so much you can do in the back end that in the past used to take days, weeks, even months sometimes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I liked how you structured the answer first of that AI isn't just changing content creation, it's changing everything about our lives. And I was very cautious and a slow adopter to AI at first because I had this aversion to it, so to speak. And I think one of the big questions a lot of people have or big concerns is that people are outsourcing their thinking to the AI now, that they're not actually thinking for themselves. And when I started adopting AI, that was one of the big things that I was super averse to. But I do like treating it more as a conversation partner or a debate partner. So that way, when I'm trapped in my room thinking to myself, I can have sanity checks. It's as if I have a really intelligent friend sitting next to me and I can ask them questions. Now, I think where people go sideways is I use the analogy of building a house, where they expect the AI to just build them a house and then whatever it outputs, that's what they use, instead of using AI as power tools. That's how I look at it, is that I'm the engineer and I'm the architect and I have this full suite of power tools at my disposal, but I still need to have the brains, the
Yes.
rigor, and the decision making to architect and engineer my plans and then let the AI execute on that. Do you have any insights onto how people might abuse or misuse AI instead of relying on their own cognition?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, anything that comes out that's kind of shiny and new, people get excited and then they sort of get a bit lazy because they start outsourcing everything to AI. And like you said, they make the AI tool build the house. But the problem with that is there's two main issues there. Number one, AI tools aren't perfect. That you will find that, and they even say it on the tools, like, watch out, there are mistakes. This tool can make mistakes. Claude, ChatGPT, all these tools can make mistakes. So you need to be able to be very involved in the process to ensure that actually this isn't, giving me incorrect output, right? Because again, it can be quite dangerous if there's a topic you don't know much about and you're like, yeah, let me just take it at face value. So that's quite scary. So you really need to make sure that the answers that are being outputted are correct. So that's why you need to stay on top of it. And the second thing is, like you said, it's kind of like if you outsource your brain to AI, then that's it. You'll stop using your brain, and we need to use our brains in order to keep learning and growing, right? It's like a workout. It's kind of like, so I just thought of an analogy. You know, when you go and you lift weights, and like you try to build muscle, right? You're putting time and effort, but the weights aren't being lifted for you. You're lifting the weights, and over time, the muscles get bigger and stronger. And then there are people who want to take a shortcut, and they'll use sort of like, you know, these, I don't know what they're called, but these like pads that like basically make your muscles contract. So it's like an electric current runs through your muscle. So it's kind of like the machine is doing the workout for your body. And at the end of the workout, you're exhausted, but you haven't moved much. The current is moving your muscle for you. So when you do that and you become fully reliant on the tool, it's really, really hard to sort of, number one, be very involved in what it is that you're creating. And number two, get back on, like if I start outsourcing everything to AI, I'm going to get lazy, and then I'm going to not want to do any more work. So I'm just going to rely on these tools, and I'm going to, and it's going to sound, it's not going to sound like me, it's not going to think like me. So use it as a sparring partner and a second brain as opposed to a replacement.
Yes, I really like that last bit of a sparring partner, because that implies that you're challenging it, that you're not taking it at face value. And I've even ran tests between ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude where I can get them to talk themselves in circles with me. That
Yes,
I
so have
change
I.
my mind and I say, I'm not sure you're quite
Yeah. Are
right
you
on that.
sure? Are you sure? Push back a few times and watch how the tool just crumbles.
Yes, and coming from a more STEM oriented background and having some stats under my belt too, that I'm flabbergasted that there aren't confidence ratings associated with any given output with these AIs. That I don't care necessarily that it might be wrong, because I understand it's imperfect, but I want to know what degree of confidence any given result or any AI model has in any given result. And I think that's a severe UX, human factors oversight. That's my background, human factors and UX.
Yeah.
I think that's a big oversight in the industry, but it might be for the customer experience that they don't want people to see the confidence ratings, because that might cause people to distrust it and then not use it more. So I'm very skeptical on how they've approached the customer experience and user experience with these tools concerning the fallibility, but not making it readily available for people to see.
No, 100%. I agree that the lack of transparency is definitely there. And I think, don't forget, you've got a few major companies fighting to be the best LLM or the best, like, you know, all round AI tool. And so if they start showing that, you know, the confidence ratings, then the problem there is the other company might outrun them, right? So, you know, again, it is a business at the end of the day, right? So, and I think that, you know, I mean, I agree with you. I think there definitely should be confidence ratings in the outputs, but maybe that will come further down the line. But I don't see it happening anytime soon.
Yes, businesses, that's a big problem, and maybe that's something we're jumping the gun on, but that's something I want to talk more about is business profitability and algorithms and AI, and how that's creating a lot of the problems we're currently facing. So I am going to shift gears a little bit to, you mentioned something once about the cultural differences you've experienced. I suppose it was when you were at TikTok, since TikTok is
Yeah,
very heavily related to China,
yeah.
that you notice big cultural shifts, that America seems to be more debate and discussion centric, whereas China seems to be more execution centric.
Yes, 100%. So when you know, when I was at Google, I mean, the culture is obviously different. Google offices have their own culture, but you know, the main sort of culture is that American culture. And you know, it's great because you've got that whole like, let's innovate, let's talk, let's debate, let's discuss ideas, right? But action kind of, taking action is a bit slower, because they want to make sure that everything's kind of, especially when these companies get bigger and bigger, I think they want to make sure that, you know, everything's is done correctly, responsibly, you know. And so there are certain processes, and so sometimes that lack of taking action, I suppose, is it can hurt them, because the reason why these companies grew so quickly was because when they first started, they were just, you know, shooting for the stars. The sky was the limit. That they had that kind of mindset, right? And then the bigger a company gets, the more complex it gets, the more kind of, you know, laws and regulations come in. So it becomes a bit of a slower moving beast. I think with TikTok, again, it's one of those companies that is quite new. It came in and it disrupted the whole social media industry. So execution wise, they do not, they're just on it 24/7. And so it was interesting because at one point I was in a meeting when I first joined, and I remember like we were talking about something in the UI. And like, oh, how long will this be updated? And it, back from my days at my time at Google and YouTube, I was like, oh, probably take weeks, months, maybe it won't even, maybe this input won't even be taken into consideration because we've got so many engineers that work on these products. And then at TikTok, it was like, oh, sorry, it's going to take a bit of time. And I was like, oh, okay, probably a few months. A bit of time to them was like 2 days. And I was like, oh, what? 2 days? And people were complaining. They were like, oh, God, this is so slow. And I was like, guys, 2 days is like, is light years. So they do operate at that kind of frequency. And again, I understand why. They're a new company and they're trying to sort of push. So there's a massive difference in those two worlds, culturally as well as operationally.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I've had to rewire myself, so to speak, now that I'm going solo on my own career, because I came from my most recent job was contracting with the Veterans Health Administration here in the US with a private company. So a private company employed me, bid on contracts with the Veterans Health Administration, and then we were contractors with them. So I had government IDs and logins and hardware even, and worked side by side government employees. Like it was very commingled. And as you can imagine, the VA is a massive institution that's a part of an even
Yeah.
more massive institution, the U.S. government. And it was a constant drudgery of discussion culture. Of
Yes.
you had to document that you documented something. It was awful, and
Yeah.
that plus my other jobs really kind of trained this passivity in me of sitting around talking about things. And it seems that in America we have this tendency to want consensus
Yeah.
before we take action. And I don't necessarily know all the substrates of why that might be. One hypothesis I have is that America is very litigious, so it's really easy to sue people. So
Yeah. Yeah.
people really want to cover their backs before they make decisions. That's one thought. But yes, now that I am on my own and I'm responsible for everything and I don't have to answer to anyone and I don't have to document that I documented things, I am gravitating to this more execution oriented,
Yeah.
rapid rapid execution, and it increases my competence and makes me more empowered because
Yes.
I'm spending less time talking about it and more time doing it.
Doing it, and you learn faster, you grow faster. And creation, like you create your outputs, you create more, right? And the more you create, that's essentially data, isn't it? Data for you to learn from. So you're speeding up the process, versus spending all this time talking about things. And to be honest with you, like, I don't know about you, but like for me, when I spend so much time talking about something, I kind of start to lose interest in it because I'm like, why am I spending all this time talking about it? There must be something wrong with it. So subconsciously, I feel that, is this the right thing to do? Because we know that we have gut feelings, right? And like we need to sometimes like listen to our gut. And so if something feels right, you're like, I want to do it right now. But if something feels a bit like, oh, why are we talking about this for like 2 weeks? There must be something that's not 100%, great about whatever it is that we're trying to do.
Yes, that's interesting. I know for me that when I embrace the execution culture, there's a higher chance things can go wrong too, so to speak. Or let me rephrase, things will go wrong from wrong action, opposed to things
The true version of what's happening is, if you made millions in the first 3 months, why are you trying to sell?
will go wrong from inaction. There's errors of
Yes,
commission versus
definitely.
errors of omission. But I think that there's some sort of emotional learning or operant conditioning that if I take action and it's wrong, I'm stressed. I have that
Yeah.
nausea in my stomach of I'm responsible for this. I committed the wrong action and it's leading to this. And then that motivates me to want to do more action. And I learned that lesson, quote unquote, the hard way. So that's going
Mm.
to stick with me more.
Yeah.
Whereas if all of my errors are inaction oriented, I don't know what I did wrong necessarily. There
Exactly.
isn't
You don't
that
have the data. You don't have any data. You're literally just, it's guesswork.
and you don't have that sinking gut feeling because
Yeah.
you don't know that you're missing out on things. So
Yes.
that's a
100%.
very interesting paradigm of how do we how do we balance that? And then obviously between smaller companies and larger companies, and in your experience between Western US companies and Eastern Chinese companies. Very interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so you read one of my papers. This was back in the early days of me on Substack,
yeah,
and dealing with the performative content trap. Can you talk about this a
yes.
little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this is like the bane of my existence. But so I think it's the bane of a lot of people's existences. But okay. The good thing about social media is it's made the world a lot smaller and accessible. We can sort of peek into each other's worlds essentially. But the problem with social media is that a lot of those worlds are not built on reality. So, you've got the people on all the platforms kind of have this performative nature or can have this performative nature. Instagram, TikTok, even YouTube. YouTube's a bit more tricky because long form content is a bit more difficult to fake. Whereas like short form content, like you can do it on Shorts or Instagram or TikTok, you've got people kind of sort of, I don't know, creating a persona or maybe creating a version of their life that they may not really exist. And I feel that that puts a lot of pressure on people, and it can cause depression in a lot of people. So, the perfect life, the perfect, marriage, the perfect family, the perfect body, all those kind of, themes. One of which is starting your own business, right? So when you start your own business, the reality isn't I made $1 million in 3 months. The reality is, I've had to kind of graft and work hard and push and get knocked down and then get up again and then get knocked down again and get up again, and it's that whole I mean, I think I wrote a Substack article about Sisyphus. Yeah, Sisyphus, the guy who in Greek mythology was pushing a boulder up a rock. That was his punishment. He had to keep pushing. Every time he get to the top, it would go all the way back down. And it sort of feels like that when you start business. But there's a tipping point, I think. And so the more consistent and the more kind of, I suppose it's not just consistency. I think it's more like you'll have really bad days, you'll have really good days, but the bad days are going to be bad. The good days are going to be really good. And the bad days are just going to say, what, make you want to give up. So it's just kind of like having that resilience to say, no, it's a bad day. I will keep going. And I will not listen to this nonsense of like, I made $1 million in 5 minutes. That's not, I mean, maybe someone has done that once, but even people like Elon Musk, hasn't claimed to create that kind of wealth in such a short amount of time. And another thing that also showcases that these people aren't necessarily sharing me a course, that costs like $300, right? And trying to show me how to do it. Clearly you've got it figured out. Why are you trying to sell me a course with, when you're spending time with me and for really not that much money, right? It's in the grand scheme of things. So that kind of makes you kind of question, like, right, is this story really, really true? And so yeah, so I think that you have to watch out for that performative aspect, and that's why I love platforms like Substack, because you actually find people who are more kind of willing to discuss the messy parts and the hard bits and the bits that are real and that are raw and that we can all kind of relate to.
Excellent. Yes. I've have interviews set up with other people where we discuss this performative content trap. And are you familiar with the term limbic capitalism?
No, it sounds familiar, but I don't know what it is.
Yes, it's a new idea that or it's an idea I've newly come across, and it's the
Okay.
idea of trying to hijack people's limbic systems because that's the emotional charge that's going to get them invested in your product. And one article I read was it's always been limbic. Everything about the free market has always been limbic. Like you have to somehow persuade people
Yeah.
to at least try your product for the first time before you even have the reviews to build the reputation. And it seems that social media has supercharged that notion
Value.
or adding value. This is one of my
Yeah.
big gripes, it seems, because I come from an ecosystem where people will cut straight through all of that and go show me the data. We
Yeah.
don't care what you sound like. We don't care
Yeah.
what you look like. Show me the data. And then as I've stepped into this new world, I'm like, oh, people really do fall prey to this limbic
Yes.
hijacking.
Yes. Yes, that's 100% true. And I mean, you can't, like you said, the data is what shows you what's working and what's not, and what's real and what's not, what's true and what's not. And I think the performative, unfortunately, a lot of I think okay, a lot of content creators maybe believe their own lies. So I've actually come to after working with so many of them, I've started to sort of understand that some of them aren't out to get you. Some of them actually believe that this is what they're doing, and it's very easy to get brainwashed, on social media. Like, even myself, I'm not like I'm not a teenage girl. I'm in my early 40s, and I fall prey. Like, if I'm ill and I can't, for example, I can't go to the gym, and I follow a lot of women who lift weights and do bodybuilding. And if I see them lifting weights, I'm like, why am I, like, I get really upset because I'm like, I can't do this right now because I'm ill, I'm in bed or whatever. And then, I get upset. And then someone like my husband or whoever will say, but you of all people know that this is, number one, not happening in real time, and number two, this isn't, like, a lot of this isn't real, and these people also get ill or like have to take breaks or whatever it is. So so it's very easy to fall prey to that trap. Like, it's not, it's and sometimes you start to question, actually, maybe this person isn't lying, because they can be very convincing, right? Especially if they believe their own version of reality, or if they've consistently been creating content around that theme for a long time. You may fall victim to that and think, maybe this person's actually telling the truth. And I'm not saying it's all lies. There could be, there could be some truth to it, but I'm saying a lot of it has become, very sort of exaggerated, and and it puts pressure on a lot of people.
Yes, yes, I can relate to that too. That it's really easy to feel inadequate, and it's a cliche at this point, but social media is other people's highlight reels,
Yes.
not the behind the scenes. Which that raises another question about the performative content trap, where authenticity and the behind the scenes look has become where people can really tap into our limbic systems and try to elicit these emotional feelings, because the god of all of this is attention and engagement. That's what people are after. They're not necessarily after quality products
Yes.
anymore,
Or adding
and
that.
its own performance at this point. And I think this is historical from the professional era, probably the pre-social media professional era, where it was more cold of, we don't care anything about you as a person. What goods and services are you providing us? And that's one
Yeah.
end of the spectrum. And then people started caring more of, hey, let's have some human connection and let's have some empathy. But that's been hijacked to the point where that's the market now of, they've completely forsaken the quality of, or the legitimacy of, the goods and services in favor of this, look at me, I'm a human that's doing a job. And that then becomes the entertainment infotainment service at the
Yeah.
expense of this other end. So I'm trying to figure out how can we equalize that of, we're all humans, we all have our quirks, our ups and downs, but at the end of the day, we do need to provide valuable goods and services, not just performance of, I'm a human.
100%. And I think so now the pendulum has swung, where it's like, oh, authenticity is the new buzzword. And I understand that, obviously one of the things I tell creators is you need to be authentic. But the problem with that is that now people are creating content to make themselves look more authentic by, so being more authentic is actually them faking being more authentic, which defeats the purpose, right? And so that's the problem, is that I would much rather you be honest with me and say, you know what, I'm not very authentic. Like, I'm quite a shallow person. I don't care. I want to sell you this product. At least then that is the authentic version of them, because then I'm like, okay, this is someone I probably wouldn't follow, but I respect the fact that they're honest about what it is that they're doing, right? Versus someone who's trying to sell me this story and dream and stuff. And there's so much of it that you can't, like, to be honest, I switch off most of the time, because I'm like, okay, I can't even watch this. Like, this is now getting, which is a shame, because I might be missing out on what's actually someone who could be adding a lot of true and value. But it's just overwhelming now, so I'm lucky in the sense that I've been in this field for so long that I can it's easy for me to spot. But, like, unless you've been working in this atmosphere for so, it's really hard for you to understand the signals.
Correct. Yes, the signal to noise ratio
Yeah,
has severely polluted the environment where it's an
yeah,
instant turn off that if they
yeah,
are talking about authenticity or let me show you a day in my life, I'm like, I don't
yeah, yeah,
care. Like I don't need more fantasy fulfillment. I need more goods and services at a good
exactly.
price that are going to benefit my life.
Exactly. And
And
escapism, I mean, social media is good for escapism, but like we use escapism. So, for example, if I was watching a video about, I don't know, someone painting or someone creating art or creating, doing something in DIY or cooking a meal, even that for me is great because that's, I can escape, I can switch off my brain and stuff. But I don't want to escape with it when it comes to all the content, right? Like if it's something that I need to learn from or grow from, I don't want that to be sold to me, like you said, in a way that's like almost, phantasmic. I want it to be sold to me in a way that's like, this is what it's going to do for you. This is what you need it for. This is how much time you're going to use it for, and this is how much it costs. End of.
right, right. Yes. I think given my training and my disposition that I'm very skeptical where I when it comes to consumption, I'm very cold. And the word authenticity gets thrown around and one of my big concepts, if you will, or one of my big arguments is we need to operationalize these constructs like authenticity. What does that mean?
Yes.
Because there are people that can be very rude or impersonable or annoying or what have you, that in the pop culture sense, they might not be very authentic, but they do authentically work hard at their craft. So
Yeah.
that's the authenticity I care about. That it's the example, kind of like the Patch Adams doctor example of, do you want a fun, goofy doctor that's going to make you laugh that maybe his care isn't the best? Or do you want the rude, snobbish doctor who's top of his class?
Yeah.
And that's a personal decision. And I'm going to err on the side of I want the rude, snobbish doctor that's top of his class. I don't want to
Same.
laugh when I'm at the doctor necessarily.
Exactly. There's a time and a place for everything, right? So there's a time and a place for that escapism, that fun, that kind of, you know, just again switching off. But then if there are certain things that you actually need, that sort of coldness, I mean, I would say, yeah, a little bit of coldness, because that is what, you're going by data, you're going by facts, you're not going by emotions. And I think, there needs to be a bit of a, like you said, a bit of a difference, or people need to be able to identify when they need this and when they need that.
Yes. And most jobs, I would argue, are pretty boring for the most part to any outsider. That if I were to showcase my authenticity at my work, it's okay, here's me reading some dense philosophical text for an hour. Okay,
Yeah,
here's me typing and obsessing over one sentence for 20 minutes in my weekly publication. Here's me rehearsing a speech I'm giving for 20 minutes that I have to memorize 5 minutes. It's not entertaining. It's not fun.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
authentic, but it's not
yeah.
entertaining.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. 100%.
Yes. And the other point I want to talk about, this performative content trap, one that I'm very anti is the hustle culture. Because in this social media content algorithm era, you have to constantly pump out the content to be relevant. And that goes into the hustle culture where people
Yeah.
like the Hormozis of the crowd are constantly that's their entire MO. And then not everyone can sustain that. And then also that they selling hustle culture becomes its own business.
Yes, 100%. And that's, see, again, that's the dangerous bit, right? You've got so many people who are either very quite young or impressionable online, who don't understand that, what, this person may not be, 100% telling the truth. And I think that that's what's kind of scary, right? Like having a young, so for example, when I was working at YouTube, a lot of my friends, they have children and stuff, and their son or daughter would be quite, still quite young, and their mum would introduce them to me, and I'd be like the celebrity, because I work at YouTube, and why, like, what is it that I, why am I like so cool? And it's because I want to be a YouTuber when I grow up and become a millionaire. And that's their kind of, that's the way they think. Like they don't think about like, okay, well, I want to be a doctor, lawyer, whatever. It's like, I want to be on social media and I want to be a social media star, and I'll stop at kind of anything to get there. And that's why you have content like, like now we have a lot of exposure to things like the manosphere and people like Andrew Tate who've brainwashed so many young boys, and have made so much money doing so, right? So that's the dangerous bit, is that they've created this fake world. And a lot of boys, I'm sure, and I say boys because again Andrew Tate's target audience is males, but a lot of boys are probably thinking, oh, when I grow up, I want to be Andrew Tate. I want to be like him. I want to be a social media star and drive a Ferrari and have all these women, and have all these diamonds and whatever. So, and so that's why it's really, really scary that, you can really trick people in a very, very easy way with this hustle culture and with this kind of, this kind of like, if you just keep churning content out, then and it's essentially like the repetitive content. It's the same, like a lot of the content that I see on, for example, platforms like LinkedIn is like, I did this on LinkedIn, I made all this money, come and join my blah blah blah, come in this and come in that. And it's literally the same message being regurgitated over and over and over again. That I think what it is essentially you're brainwashing people to believe that you've made millions out of whatever this is, that they would be willing to pay you to learn how to make millions. But what is the lesson? The lesson is just keep repeating the message and brainwash other people. So it's almost like a pyramid scheme in that sense.
Yes, yes. LinkedIn is my least favorite because it has the pretense of professionalism
Yeah.
in. So at least on TikTok and Instagram, I know people are vanity projects. On LinkedIn, that's where that my
Yeah.
circle jerking essay came in, that they just wear
Yeah.
blazers while they do it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
with the social media content creator industry and that the top performers and the persona and lifestyle that they carry, to me it's the next evolution of the rock stars of the 70s and 80s.
Yes,
And
exactly.
people want the accomplishment, they want the glory, they want to be Eddie Van Halen smoking a
Yeah.
cigarette while he's reinventing how to play guitar, or they want, and then they want the women or the drugs and the fun and the cool
Yeah.
lifestyle. But how many people are willing to study music the same way that any of these rock stars did? Several of them have music degrees and were pioneers of music because they did the thousands of hours of practice and music theory, which is really boring to a lot of people. I've been a musician before, and it's a lot of boring hours doing that. And when I've stepped into this space of content creation, it's not necessarily that I want to be a content creator. It's that I see problems I want to discuss and attempt to resolve, or I have something I want to say. Now, I'm a very loquacious person, and I actually got started giving toasts. That's where a lot of this began. I gave a wedding toast, and my life changed that night. And it's not that I want to necessarily be a content creator, it's that I want to talk about how much my friends mean to me in public situations and do it eloquently and do it
Yeah.
memorably. And that's not repetitive. That's not something that you can do on LinkedIn or TikTok
No.
and constantly churn out content. It's like I give 3 speeches a year and they typically take 20 hours per speech to write and deliver. So
Yeah.
I don't think people, I think it falls back to that limbic, that they see the glory and they want that
Yes.
rather than pursuing a meaningful direction of, I want to solve this problem, I want to talk
Yeah.
about these
Or
topics,
learn, or
etc.
learn and grow through this experience. Like you said, like now you're probably much better at giving speeches than you were when you first started, right? Because you've had to practice. So it's the same thing. It's like, for example, a content creator, when they start to learn how to edit videos and then their videos end up looking really cool. So like if you ask any content creator, they'll go to their first video, they'll be like, please, I can't watch this, it's horrible. But then now, like 10, 20, 30, 100 videos later, they're like, wow, I've actually really upped my game and I've learned how to create really cool content, right? And so the learning part, I think, is what's missing. Like you said, Van Halen, like learning how to play the guitar, or doing the music, learning how to sing, or whatever it is. I think back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, there were definitely less opportunities than there are now, because again, there wasn't social media, and every kind of sort of, it was much harder to kind of break out and become an artist. True, nowadays there's way more competition because anyone can literally just upload a video to YouTube and sing a song, and so there's way more competition. However, you have so many more tools to learn cool new things where the sky's the limit. And so why waste it on selling air to people and lie, essentially cheating, cheating them, and really, like, for me, look, I believe if you put something good out into the world, you'll get something good back, or you'll get multiple things that are good back. If you put out, if you lie, if you try to cheat people, you're going to get all of that back, right? So these, like, I may, buy my course, blah blah blah, they may work short term, but once people see through you and see that you're a phony, or that you're not really giving them anything to learn or grow from, or you're not inspiring them at all because you're just telling them to repeat, then they're gonna run a mile. And when you, I don't know about you, but like when I see someone, let's say I'm helping someone, I'm training someone on something, and I'm teaching them how to do something, and then I see them do it, like, the amount of pride that I feel, and the amount of, like, I feel good because I've helped another human being, or I've shown another human being something, and that human being's confidence is gonna, as a result of it, that is going to grow. And the more their confidence grows, the more they're going to want to learn more, and they're going to keep going. And that is what it's about. It's not about get rich quick schemes. It's about, like, really learning from everything that you're working on.
Oh, that was a wonderful answer. And the idea of loving a skill and willing to sacrifice to get good at it is an unfathomably deep sense of pride for people. That I'll go back to my speeches, that the speech that changed my life that night, it was my best friend's wedding, and I spent 15 to 20 hours on a 5-minute speech.
Wow.
What kind of psycho does
Yeah.
that?
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't expect other people to do that, because that's the niche I found that I'm willing to do that. And then I've even upped it. My birthday speech this past year was more like 60 hours.
Wow.
So,
But you love it. See, you love it. It's not just that you're good at it. You love doing it, right? And that's another thing. Because you love it, you'll spend 60 hours, you'll spend 100 hours, you'll spend, because of how much you love it. And that's really what it's about.
yes, yes. So there's all this seduction. Yeah, it's seduction and love, I suppose. That there's the seduction of the lifestyles and the fame and the glory of the content creators, but that's all sirens and muses. It's
Yeah.
not companionship, it's not love. And
It's not connection. It's not
right.
connection. And that's what people are looking for on these platforms mainly. They're looking for connection. They're looking to connect with another human being. And if that person is again very empty and hollow and not really giving them anything, you can't connect, right? And then what's the point of this whole kind of, what's the point of you creating content if you're not willing to connect to your community, or even start building a community? If you're just like, me, look at me, I'm amazing, I've done this, I've done that. Again, it's kind of like, the kind of, if we're comparing to the, back in the day, when you see supermodels, people don't really love supermodels. And the reason I think why they don't love them is they may admire them and think, oh wow, she's beautiful, or he's beautiful, or their body, or blah blah blah. But there's no really love, there's no love there. And the reason why is because the supermodel is technically a hanger for clothing, right? And so and we're not, I'm not saying, I don't mean to sound mean, but like, they're literally there just to showcase clothing. So you'll see they don't, not a lot, I mean most of them don't smile. They're just meant to be, because they don't want to distract your, that's their job. They're meant to just showcase the clothes. So you're not meant to fall in love with them, you're meant to just fall in love with what they're wearing. So that's the thing, is they're very cold and almost robotic. And so you wouldn't really find someone that's like, oh my god, I'm obsessed with this supermodel, the same way that they'd be obsessed with an actor or actress or singer back in the day, because they're very talented. You wouldn't really say the supermodel's talented. That she is gorgeous, maybe very popular, but she's not necessarily talented because she walks down, a runway just like any other supermodel does. So I think that's the kind of difference between building that connection and just, and just showcasing how perfect you are.
Speaking of the seduction and love and connection paradigm, you worked inside big tech for over a decade, and then at some point you realize that's not for you anymore, and you call it the divorce. Can you talk a little bit more about how you changed as a person that led you away from that environment, saying, I don't love this anymore?
Yeah. So, working at a company like Google was like, for me, getting a job there was like climbing Kilimanjaro. It was like, my dream. And I studied, analytics and digital marketing. So it was everything I ever wanted and more. And, and that's why I stayed for 13 years. And I loved it. I mean, at the beginning, I was just so overwhelmed. I was like, imposter syndrome, all that stuff. But and I made the some of the best friends I've in my life made through events and working with these people and just being at Google, because you meet such amazing people. But the problem with big tech is after a while, the growth kind of sort of, you don't really continue to learn as much. Even if you change jobs, it's kind of like you'll learn a few new skills, but it's the same sort of, it's just the corporate world. It's the same sort of way of working, having the meetings, sitting and planning the projects and execution. It's all kind of the same process, so you're not really sort of stretching any new muscles essentially. And so after a while it becomes a bit like almost heavy energy, because you're like, well, I've done this, and it's a bit Groundhog Day. You're like, well, I've done this 50 million times. I can do this with my eyes closed. And it's no longer challenging or exciting the way it used to be when I first, started to learn about it. So, and it's like that, I think, with most things that, most jobs, and not just tech, but most industries. And so for me, I've always wanted to kind of do my own thing, and my world is the creator world, and I was obviously into AI, but being at Google or TikTok wouldn't allow me to really spend that time to learn how to get good at the different tools. And I'd be bound by working on tools that I'd have to work on for my job, for my corporate job. And I also have a son, and having a child changes the way you prioritize everything, right? Yeah, it changes your life, but it changes how where you want to spend your time. So essentially you continue to ask yourself, is this the best version of myself, for my child? Like, am I showing the best version of myself to my child, or am I just stressed, overworked, burnt out, bored, uninspired? I don't want him, or if I have more children, I don't want them to see their mother in that state, because I don't want them to learn that that's an okay state. And someone actually, this is a really good question that I ask myself whenever I want to make sure something's a good fit. So when I was younger, I was, I was in a situation where I was dating a guy that wasn't really great for me. And I mean, he was an okay guy, but we were really not right for each other. And my friend asked me something. She said, would you let this guy, hypothetically, if you had a daughter, would you let him marry your daughter? And my first answer was like, of course not. Are you crazy? And she was like, if he's not good enough for your daughter, then he's not good enough for you. Like, why are you putting such high value on your daughter and not yourself? And I was like, actually, that's a good way of looking at things. So I started asking myself that question. And now that I have a son, I feel even more. So would I let my son stay in a job that he was no longer happy at, or no longer, sort of learning or growing at? Would I be happy for him if he came home every day in this state? And the answer was no. So, so that was one of the things that was like, okay, I worked for TikTok for a while, and I realized, because I thought maybe it's Google, maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's, I've been at the same sort of role, and I was based in Dubai and I wanted to move back to the UK. So let me try something different. But to be honest, it was very similar, right? I mean, they're different cultures in terms of company, but the corporate world is similar across the board. So I decided, I'm not doing this anymore. I want to, be more present, spend more time with my son, and have that flexibility, to be able to not have to be in the office 5 days a week, and be able to work from home and on the weekends be fully present, and be able to kind of, give him all the time that he deserves, and that he needs, and that he that he loves. When I was at TikTok, I missed my son's first steps, and that was one of the things that killed me, and because I was getting home really late, and then on the weekends he was, he wouldn't let me put him down, because he was just like worried that I'd leave him and abandon him, and that's not a healthy, environment, or it's not a healthy thing for your child to go through, right? And that would destroy me, obviously. So nowadays my husband said to me, "What's wrong? Like, why just do it? Just take the leap. Like, what's holding you back?" So that was the thing. My identity was so tied to Google that I had to move to TikTok to fake divorce it. But I was still married to Google because I had been there for so long. And then once I left TikTok, it took me a while to still get it out of my system. Like I still had Google in my system, and it just I felt lost without it. And um and then something really interesting happened where you start your business, you're doing all the outreach, you're doing everything. I started to say, okay, I'm back in the UK. My main sort of authoritative voice is still in the Middle East. Like everyone in the Middle East knows me. I've got a huge network there, etc. The war happened in Iran, which stopped a lot of client work, and budgets got cut, etc. So my husband said, "Listen, why are you so reliant on the Middle East?" And I was like, "Because I've built my network there. I've been there for the last 10 years." And he said, "Yeah, but you need to branch out. And you used to work here in the UK. You grew up here. Like, come on, you need to kind of get back into the swing of things and make your brand or your consultancy global." And when he said that, I was like, actually, why am I so fixated on the Middle East? Let me look into this. So I started, speaking to more people on Substack, speaking to people on LinkedIn, etc. But what really helped push the authoritative voice here was speaking engagements. So once I started to do that without Google, I'm ex Google, but it wasn't Google booking me as a speaker. It was me booking myself as a speaker, and the people would be like, I never thought that they'd say yes, but it was brilliant. They were like, of course, yes. And I had speaking engagements and roundtables where I had to kick people out of the room because the roundtable that was meant to go for 45 minutes lasted for 2 hours and a half. And we had to close the place down. So that helped build my confidence as in the fact that, like, well, look, you don't need Google. You're you, and all the knowledge that you've acquired, but all the other knowledge that you've learned, across the years outside of Google have also helped create this human being. So that really helped me kind of with my divorce. Sorry, very long answer, but bear with me.
That was wonderful. And I think a lot of people can relate to your emotional journey on that, albeit not necessarily tied to professionalism or careerism. That I think people get their identities wrapped up in something, whether it's
Yes.
for me in my past, I grew up devout Christian and apostatized, or people get wrapped up in political movements or ideologies, or
Yes.
in the case of the modern West, which there seems to be a lot of kickback to now, is careerism. And
Yes.
what I find fascinating about your story is one thing that I'm keen on is the lower birth rates, the lower marriage rates, the lower amount of younger people going on dates and having sex. And while careerism seems to be tied to that, and your life very much changed the moment you had a son. So your priorities and what you would consider most
Yes.
important and sacred in your life. So it seems you were, I don't want to say indoctrinated. That might be a bit too strong of a word, but you were trained or taught
Yes.
this career professional path, which does seem to be more of a Western way of thinking. And then for women, that's a double-edged sword when it comes to motherhood. And the
Yeah.
moment you had a child, and you mentioned it by name, that you missed your son's first steps, and that was devastating for you. And
Yeah.
that is what inspired you to completely change your MO of life, your entire lifestyle, that you divorced, or the word I use is apostatized from one way of
Yeah.
living.
Yeah, it's like a snake when they. I used to really love snakes, and I had three snakes growing up. So I'm really, yeah,
I've,
I know it's a bit.
you're like one of 3 women in my life that has ever said they liked
Yeah,
snakes.
I love snakes, and so a lot of people think it's really odd, but I think they're beautiful creatures, and but they shed their skin, and when they shed their skin, it's really interesting. I used to, like you watch it, they kind of slow down and they don't eat much during that time because they just want to conserve energy. They don't want to move. And then once their skin sort of all comes off, it's just so beautiful to watch because the way they do it, it's not this like, okay, I'm a new person, I'm done. I've shed the skin. It takes time. So that was something that I had to learn the hard way, that, you know, to shed that Google skin. And to be honest, it wasn't just Google. There were other things like growing up. So I was born in London. I'm originally Iraqi, and I'm very passionate about my culture. And my late father, you know, was very, he would tell us all about like where we're from and our families, and we'd visit, but like we never lived there. But and I speak Arabic as well. But I was so obsessed with being Iraqi that like all my tattoos are Iraq related and everything, you know, my whole kind of MO was like, I'm Iraqi. And people would be like, oh really, where were you born? And I'd be like, London. When did you grow up? London. And they'd be like, okay. You know, so it was very much kind of like, no, but I'm Iraqi and proud, and I'm, you know, flying the flag for all the Iraqis and blah blah blah. And when I moved to the Middle East, I realized that not everyone felt this way. It was just me that was kind of like sort of, because I felt I had to be a woman and British and this. And then my husband said, listen, I'm sorry, but you're as British as the Queen. Like, what are you talking about? Like, come on, you need to get over this. He's like, it's fine. It's lovely that you built your identity, but he's like, you need to relax a little bit. You can't just, you know, walk into every room and just talk about Iraq all the time. And it made sense. But I mean, he's Lebanese. He grew up in Lebanon. So he's like, I actually have more of a right to talk about Lebanon. But I don't, because like there's so many things that I disagree with, like with the way the country's being run and the politics and blah blah blah. And so he's like, you don't know enough about your country to realize that if you lived there, you'd want to probably leave straight away, which is true. I probably would, you know, especially, you know, I wouldn't be able to kind of fit in. So there's a lot of things that I learned sort of now as I'm getting older, that, you know, that I was so like, okay, I need to be a career woman. I need to this, I need to be this, this is my identity. That we're not one identity, right? Or two identities. We're an amalgamation of multiple experiences and things. And the thing I love about living in a place like London, for example, and I don't know if you know much about London, but you know, we were talking about the expat kind of community, is that everyone's from London and no one's from London, right? You know, it's like a melting pot of like multiple cultures, multiple things. So you can learn and from every single human being around you, because we're all so different, you know, but we all have a common culture that ties us together, which is being a Londoner, and like, you know, being polite in certain situations, or helping someone, or this, there's certain things, there's unwritten sort of rules or unwritten cultural kind of behaviors that all everyone in London, even if they're not originally from here or if they've just moved here, they kind of start to adopt. So I think that's what's so cool about having not having that identity, is that you can have all the identities and no identity at the same time, and just be a product of all your experiences.
Wow, that's really profound and something I deeply relate to. And I often draw the paradigm of inherited identity versus
Yes.
agentic identity. So your Rocky descent, have you ever lived there?
Never.
No. Okay, so you lived in Dubai and Jordan, but not Iraq. So
Jordan for a
you're
bit, yeah.
it's interesting to claim this Iraqi heritage identity structure because ethnically, racially, familially, that's what you are, but it's never actually been directly part of your life. Whereas your agentic identity are the things that you have chosen to do with your life, that you've chosen to be a more career oriented woman.
Yes.
You've chosen to be a wife and a mother. You've chosen to be an entrepreneur and be everything else that you do with your life. I think you work out quite a bit in all these other facets. And that, I think that's something I was keen on at a young age, that I'm, in the political sense, I'm a straight white American male.
Yeah.
None of that I chose.
Yeah.
That's just, that
That's
was
what you
my,
were born into.
so in a lot of respects, they're the least interesting parts about me,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
I'm like, okay, I don't
They're
know how
your
to talk.
default settings, essentially, you
Yes.
know, yeah.
So then I start leaning more into this agentic identity. And I think it has to deal with social pressures and our evolutionary psychology, that people will grab onto the inherited identity and defend it with their life. I read this Schopenhauer quote the other day where he says, like, you're assigned a name, a country, and a race the first 5 minutes you're born, and then you spend your life defending it.
Yes. Yeah.
And now that you brought up this segues into the expat thing, that I think me being an expat or me doing this, these are the interesting parts of my life because that's what I've
Yeah,
chosen with the clay I was given. The clay I inherited, sure, and then I
yeah,
this is what I've built with my life. And I think there is a dividing line between a lot of people that there's some of us that were cut from this cloth where we favor the agentic identity, or
yeah,
in both of our cases, we had the inherited identity, we defended it, and then we switched. We had that
yeah,
flip of the switch. And what you were saying about the snakes shedding their skin and changing as a person is it's not a light switch, a flip of the light switch.
no,
It
it's
is,
not.
I was talking with somebody the other day and I said it's a boiling pot of water.
Yeah,
You use the snake analogy, and I was saying, no, it takes
yeah,
time. You have to have
mm,
constant heat, and it starts off small, the little bubbles form on the bottom,
yeah,
and then after time it's a rolling boil, and
well,
that's when
yeah,
you change as a person, because a
yeah,
lot of the big changes in my life happen very slowly, and if people are trying to convince me to change my mind, arguing with me and berating me isn't going to help. I'm not going to switch
exactly.
like a light switch. You have to nurture it. So that's all very interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about the skill no one warned you about that you would need?
Yeah, so the sitting in the middle skill. Oh God, that one actually I recently cracked it. I wouldn't say perfected, obviously, it's still early days, but so so one of the major things that I've kind of had as a child is my extremism. I'm very all or nothing. You know, so I'm either super like committed to something or I'm not interested. You know, I'm never sort of in the middle. And I think this comes from a place where I'm a very passionate person. So if I believe in something, I'll defend it, you know, to the death. And I'm a bit older now, so I'm a bit kind of like calmer. But when I was younger, I was very much like, no, these are my beliefs, you know. And by the way, you know, when someone challenges your beliefs, I think there was a book that I read that where he said it's kind of the parts of your brain that light up are similar to if you were being attacked by a lion, like you'd be running away from a lion. So that's how kind of ingrained our beliefs are. And so for me, the main issue that I had growing up is I was so passionate about everything. And again, you know, the scene was already set up for me. You know, I'm an Iraqi woman, you know, and so I have to prove that, you know, women are strong and, you know, in my culture and this and that and that. And so even though I had very liberal parents, my dad was like, you know, massive feminist, but I was like, I'm a feminist. And, you know, so I always had these strong beliefs. And so my extremism um, led me to, you know, quitting smoking and like cold turkey, like, no, I'm going to be healthy, quitting smoking, losing 16 kilos, you know, like lifting weights. I was always into exercise, but like eating, learning about how to eat, macro counting, all that stuff, weighing food, getting a job at Google, you know, killing myself to get a job at Google, spending over a year trying to find to get a job there. And just not giving up, right? So this extreme mindset, which is great. It helps you get promoted. It helps you get, you know, it helps you move forward in your career. It helps you get things done. But at the same time, it's a lot of masculine energy, and that masculine energy can hurt you, can you know, burn you out, right? And as humans we need to have masculine and feminine. So the feminine is the creation, is the sort of just sitting, just waiting, just kind of, you know, almost like receiving. That's what it is, receiving. So so I think I had to learn that first. And then once I started to tap into more of my feminine energy, I started to look into this sitting in the middle. Now, sitting in the middle, which means if I'm on holiday, right, I'm training, you know, I'm going to either eat everything or be very restrictive with my food, you know? So, and that's just an example, but like that to me, or like I'm just going to exercise the whole time or not at all. I mean, not at all isn't really an option, but you know, but it's just like the point is that I'm very extreme with these things. So with my business, I'm either going to go all in, kill myself, or just be lazy, right? So the and so I started to try to understand what is it, what's this void that I'm trying to fill, like what is it that makes me that lose this control, because obviously there's something there, right? And when I lose control, I I escape. I don't watch myself lose control because it's too painful to watch. And I started to talk to myself and try to understand that sitting in the middle doesn't mean you lack conviction. It doesn't mean you don't have an opinion. It doesn't mean you're a weakling. It just means that you're sort of taking time to think things through instead of being impulsive, right? Because it's extremism is being impulsive. So I I started just almost brainwashing myself, to not brainwashing, but repeating the same sort of message to myself, like, look, let's try this now. We don't need to overwhelm ourselves by changing everything. We try one step at a time. So today, for example, I'm on holiday. Today, at this lunch, I will not have that glass of wine. I'll have the glass of wine at dinner and I'll have the dessert at dinner. And I don't need to eat everything. I don't need to order half the menu, you know. I can order literally, you know, 2 3 items and that will fill me up. I don't need to order everything. So and so it's more about approaching things in a way that's less overwhelming, and it's kind of like, you know, just doing it bit by bit and not being judgmental. I think that my main issue was just being judgmental and not wanting to see what was going on, so escaping, and you know, just sort of, it's a habit I grew up with. My mum escapes everything. My mum is the major escape. Like, she's never really present, and she's always thinking about something else. And even if, like, if she's sitting with me and my son, she'll be like, oh, but I'm gonna miss him when I leave. And I'm like, well, just enjoy the time you have with him now, you know. So she's constantly thinking about something else, right? And that's just her nature. And I think I learned some of that behavior. And so now I'm just trying to bring myself back and be like, no, 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 no. Just stay present. Look at what's actually going on. It doesn't need to scare you. It doesn't need to disappoint you. Don't judge it. Just observe it. And I think, you know, self-awareness is amazing. And I know a lot of people are, you know, working on self-awareness, but not taking action is the second part of it. And that was where I was struggling. I was very aware, but I wasn't taking action. And that is the cop out that I need to kind of remind myself.
Yes, I relate to that somewhat, that kind of like this hot or cold mentality and not lukewarm on
Yeah.
anything. And I think for me, part of it is it simplifies things, in particular when it comes to productive things like working out or running the business or whatnot. Like, I don't want to have to keep track of 6 things. I want to keep track of 3 things and go full bore on them.
Yeah.
So there is that balance of, can I rein back? So it's so if you're spending all of your time on your business or whatnot, that comes at a social cost, that maybe you're losing
Yeah.
friendships or not spending enough time with family or whatnot. So what does balance there look like? Then with indulging yourself, so to speak, with exercising or eating or drinking, that to me, that seems, I've struggled with similar things, sometimes a bit more of an addiction and purging paradigm, that I can't have just one glass of wine. I'm going to have 2 or 3 at dinner. And then later, oh, I need to atone for this. So then that's where the heavy workouts go. And then especially if I deadlift, the next 2 days I'm a slug because I'm so tired
Yeah.
from a heavy deadlift today. And it's not fun. So this is something I have changed my lifestyle a little bit more of. It's okay to do things lightly. It's okay to not dive in
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
And then that also led me to the idea of, I guess the paradigm would be balance within versus balance across. So what does balance look like within my day? But then what does balance look like across my days? And I think that there are phases of life where you do need to focus and hustle and
Yeah.
sacrifice on certain things so that you can start the business. We want that. That's good, but that is going to come at a cost. But then when do you, that's the balance across your days of, then when do you change and go, okay, now I'm changing my priorities to spend more time with family or spend more time with friends, so that in any given time frame you're out of balance, but then across time frames you did reinstate some sort of balance to make sure that you're covering all your bases that you might want.
Yeah, it's like that overall balance, like you said. And I think that's something, again, you know, for me, it's just, I think listening, like now listening to myself and talking to myself, and essentially becoming my own sort of best friend or mentor. I kind of lost that voice for a while because I lost confidence. And I think, when you're not creating, so at Google, the last few years I was kind of just in limbo, right? And so I wasn't feeling very, like, I didn't feel that sense of accomplishment that I was feeling before. And I think that now that it's kind of like that, that when Stella gets her groove back kind of thing. It's like I'm feeling like, oh God, like I'm back to who the person I am, and the more I do that, the more I trust myself. And then the more I trust myself, the more I can talk to myself. I have another issue, for example, with like saying no to people. The beginning when I started my business, I was having all the meetings and meeting everyone, and it was taking up so much time that I didn't have time to actually do the work. And when I started saying no, because I would feel guilty, like, oh, but this person, and I'd feel FOMO, and you get all these little things. And now I'm like, no, 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 we're not going back on this. We've discussed this a million times. We don't need to keep going around in circles. There's no need to have FOMO. And someone actually said something to me this morning, because I brought up something interesting. I said, someone thinks that someone is like very kind of trying to meet up with me, and they're kind of trying to make me feel guilty for not, sort of meeting up, for not saying yes. But they told me last minute because, they had a last minute change of plans. So she said something like, someone's lack of organization isn't your lack of like accomplishment, or your lack of like, it was something, and I was like, actually, you're right. It's them being disorganized, and that's not my problem. That's their problem. So they need to sort of suffer the consequences of those actions, right? Just like I would suffer the consequences if I was, not organized. So I think it's just reframing things in your mind and just really talking to yourself and just making yourself understand that you don't need to be impulsive. You don't need to do the first thing you feel. You can just take a second, sit in that middle. Doesn't mean you're sitting on the fence. It just means you're taking time to, like you said, balance, and then figure out where you want to go from there.
Excellent. There's this line I've come across before in academic and professional settings where I think I had a professor had it on her desk or something, and it said, your failure to plan doesn't constitute an emergency on my part, or something like that.
I love that. That's exactly what she was trying. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, perfect way to sum it up.
Yes. And I want to add to this because one way I think about an agentic life and how we should live life in a very existential sense is directions and milestones. And I think you keyed in on this when you said that you weren't growing anymore at Google or you got bored. And it seems that you had these milestones in mind that were in a particular direction, but you never thought past those milestones necessarily, or that was the end of that direction. That, okay, I'm going to head in this direction. Okay, I hit these milestones. And then you go, now what? Oh, I want to
Yeah,
head in a different direction, and there's new milestones. So I think that's a very wise way to approach life, that you don't have to head in the same direction
exactly.
all the time. But on the other side, constantly changing directions can be a form of skirting accountability, or
Yes, and
of
being
lacking tenacity.
scatterbrained.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you have thoughts on the directions and milestones, but also not skirting accountability or being scatterbrained.
So I agree with you. I think definitely changing directions. I think so. One analogy, actually, I was speaking to a creator earlier today, and this creator has a really interesting story. He's massive on YouTube, but he recently kind of, the past 2 years, hasn't been posting very consistently. So now he wants to kind of come back, and he wants to relaunch his social media presence. But he's like, I don't want to do it the old way. I want to kind of pivot a little bit. And so he was overwhelmed because he's like, if I change all my content, then my audience is going to disappear. So the way I kind of talked him through it was mainly, you don't need to change, like you said, that milestone and shift it 180 degrees. You take one step, and then you see where that takes you. You take a little step in that direction, and then you break it down, and then you wait and see where that next step takes you, and then the next step, and then the next step, and then something that you don't even, what you don't know might show up. You know what I mean? That something so, like, such a curveball that you'll be like, I didn't even think this would come into existence, and that might carry you to this direction a little bit. So I think you have an overall goal, because we all have to have, major goals. But the overall goal doesn't have to be as specific as we kind of make them. So, for example, let's say my business, my overall goal or my mission statement or whatever you want to call it is, I really want to help add value to anyone creating content. So it could be a creator, it could be an organization, it could be an agency, and I want to help them set up agentic systems and use AI in the best way possible for their business based on their goals. So that's a broad goal that I have, right? Now, getting there is going to be different, because I could, do it through multiple ways. I could do it through my network, cold outreach. I could start creating content, and that content will start bringing in clients, or might start bringing in brands, which will lead to bringing in clients, etc., etc., etc. So there's not one way to do things. You just need to sort of do a bit of research, and then take that first step, and then see where that next step takes you into. And it's all about data for me, really. It's all about data. That's the way that I let my kind of, journey guide me. My When I first started my business, my husband was saying to me, listen, you need to create content, you need to promote your business, you need to create. He's not in this world at all, and he was like, you need to create. And I said, look, I don't want to create content. I really don't want to. I really hate being in front of the camera, and it's just, it's exhausting, and I don't want to do it. I know how much time creators, how much it takes for a creator to create content. And he was like, listen, I'm telling you, you need to create content. And he kept nagging me, nagging me, nagging me. And I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And now I realized he's right, I do. But I don't need to do it in the way that I thought I had to do it, which was, oh, I have to create all these videos. No, I can create small short form videos. I can bulk shoot, just edit them the same way, find a format that's easy to edit, and then just upload that content. And the reason why isn't because I'm of a vanity thing, because I really do hate being in front of the camera. It's more to promote my business, because how will I promote my business if people don't know I exist, right? And I do it on Substack, with the article, and I've got so much inbound from Substack where I'm like, wow, I didn't even expect this, from Canada, from the US, and so that's why it's kind of like, you try a few things, see what works, what doesn't work, and then you take the next step. And so initially I was like, oh God, I've got to create content. And it was overwhelming. And now I'm like, no, 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 no. I block shoot 6 videos, and each video can be 30 seconds, a minute long. And then I do some editing, and then I'm done. That's 6 weeks or 3 weeks worth of content, So I just break it down and turn it into tiny mini milestones in order to get to my overall goal, which is to grow the business.
Nice. I like what you say about you don't have to have the specifics detailed, because you're going to step forward, or you should step forward, and then life is going to give you feedback.
Yes.
And then you need to incorporate that feedback. And this is, I have a life planning tool, journal method that I did where I incorporate this, because it seems very engineering focused, in that I frame it with experiment with your life. I got this
Yes.
wonderful line from
Perfect.
Ralph Waldo Emerson where it's like, make more experiments.
Yes.
And then part of an experiment is data collection. So that's
Yeah.
what's reality telling you, and then iterate. So this
Exactly.
idea that you need to have some well-defined specific end goal in mind is a procrastination in disguise type
Yes.
thinking, because nobody quite knows. I'm sure there's people that have better prophetic skills or work harder to achieve those specific details, but for a lot of us, it's the mere fact of try something and iterate.
Yes, iterate, exactly. And that's how, so a lot of content creators come up to me and they say, like, will this video go viral? And so I say, let me see your data, let me understand what your audience likes. I can't give you this answer based on what I like, because I'm not your audience, I'm not the world, I'm not the masses, right? We need to look at data. So there's only when, and when you first start something, you have to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, right? And that's that's playing. And like you said, you iterate, 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 and then again you have more data, and then based on that data, and again that data can change and shift, etc., but you're responding to that data based on what it's telling you right now, which is what you need to be working on.
Excellent. And data is something that I hear a lot, especially in the spheres I've come in. And I actually work a part-time job too with my family business, where I'm trying to bring them up to speed on data. And I'm realizing a lot of people don't understand what data are, because data is actually a plural word.
Yeah, yeah.
So The whole idea of data informed decision making can be quite foreign to people. I suppose because they have these principles or beliefs or this
Yes.
idea that's so far in the future with all these specific details that they, and then it doesn't matter what data you present to them, they don't change their mind per se. So do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think there's two things. The first thing, like you said, a lot of people are so wired to like trust, it's word of mouth or what people are saying or what they think is trending, versus the actual numbers. I think a lot of creators, when I work with them, if when I show them their data, they tell me they understand, that for example their YouTube dashboard, their YouTube studio, they don't understand at all. And then we go in together and I go, okay, let's look at this now. And I break it down again, baby steps kind of thing. And they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, do you see how powerful this information is? So that's why with data, you need to kind of find a way to turn it into a story, because the saying, hits are how idiots track success. So if you say, oh, my website or my video got all these views or hits, that's useless information to me, because is the bounce rate high? What's the actual watch time on that video? How long are people staying and engaging? What's the click-through rate based on the impression? There's so many layers that need to be added to look at the overall story of a successful video or successful content, that you can't just take it as one piece. So in order for people to understand it, you need to weave it, or simplify it and turn it into a story. I think that's what I'm passionate about, is taking that data and turning it into knowledge, right? Like turning it into information that people can understand and digest and be like, oh, this is really important, some basic stuff. Like people tell me, for example, Claude, I'm obviously Claude obsessed and use code and co-work, and it's my main tool. But like a lot of people, a lot of creators, when I ask them, oh, have you used Claude? And they're like, yeah, I've used Claude. I gave a session and I asked them, how like familiar are you? And they're like, oh, very familiar. And then I went through just a few little things and they were like, wait, slow down. And I was like, guys, we're not even on co-work or code yet. We were still in chat and you're telling me to slow down. So, people think sometimes that they know more than what they actually know. And then when you show them otherwise, they're like, oh, I didn't even realize that there was this whole other world that I didn't even look at.
Yes, data. I like the whole idea of storytelling because data to the uninitiated, well, even to the initiated, can be incredibly difficult to interpret. And it's a ton of numbers on dashboards or on
Yeah,
CSV
and
files.
it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming for people in general, and let alone if it's someone who's like, gosh, I don't understand a word, and they're too embarrassed to tell you that they don't understand. So they're just like, yeah, nodding along and pretending they know what you're talking about, when really that they don't understand what this dashboard is saying.
Yes. And then I pair that too with the overconfidence. I learned this very much in my research methods and stat days that in the pop culture, people severely overstate what any given study or what any given statistic
Yeah.
might actually inform on. They tend to be less powerful than people think. They're still incredibly powerful, but they tend to be over interpreted rather than saying, in this control study, we
Yeah.
manipulated this variable and it changed this by X percent, considering the Y percent of this. And it's difficult. It's really difficult to interpret. So yes, it does take a lot of time and training and to go slow and to
Yeah.
really see what is the story the data's telling me versus what's the story I'm writing over top of the data. Those are very different, can be very different stories.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, Hala. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. This was great. A lot of fun.